Hey all, Aaron Farmer here with my sugar-free journey, and it is day 7 of the 28-day sugar-free weight loss challenge. So today we're talking about, is sugar really addictive? And this question comes up far more times than you would think, as there are plenty of people who do not think that you can be addicted to food or sugar. Let's take a look at the facts, and I think by the end of this video you will understand my position on it. To understand what's happening, you need to understand what is driving the need to eat, and to do that, we have to look at hormones again. As so many times in this 28-day challenge, it all goes back to hormones. We are pleasure-driven people. Most of the things we like to do are driven by the reward center of the brain. There are two areas of the brain that control reward. There is the ventral tegmental area, we're going to call that the VTA, and then there is the nucleus accumbens, we're going to call that the NA. Pleasure happens when the VTA tells the NA to release dopamine. When that dopamine is absorbed by the D2 receptors in the NA, you experience pleasure. So anytime you've enjoyed something, you've experienced a dopamine hit, basically. When you eat tasty food, such as food that is high in sugar, salt, and/or fat, you get that dopamine hit. My grandkid, you get that dopamine hit and like what you've done. If your hormones are all working properly, you will eat until you are satisfied, and you will quit before you overeat. But for many of us, those hormonal pathways are broken, which leads to overeating. If you get constant dopamine hits from what you're doing, you will actually wear out those dopamine receptors, requiring greater and greater amounts of dopamine for the same amount of pleasure. This is the principle that leads drug addicts to take larger and larger doses of their drug of choice to get the same high. And we do the same thing with food. We need larger and larger hits of salt, fat, and mostly sugar to get those same feelings of pleasure. Well, guess who always puts tons of salt, fat, and sugar in their food? That's right, it's the fast food and the processed food industries. When things are working smoothly, you eat good food and your body releases dopamine, so you enjoy it. When your body senses you've had enough, leptin is released, which triggers the VTA to stop releasing dopamine. So your appetite is suppressed and you feel full. But if you are leptin resistant, and again, if you're obese, you're leptin resistant, the appetite isn't suppressed and you keep eating. And as we discussed a few days ago, obesity is at its core leptin resistance. So insulin also clears away dopamine from the cells. But what if you're both leptin and insulin resistant? Now you have increased dopamine telling you how awesome it would be to eat that junk food, and you have the high insulin levels telling your body that you're starving. What chance does your willpower have against something like that? So again, when everything is working well, you smell, say, the Cinnabon. You're walking through the mall and there's a Cinnabon. You smell the Cinnabon, which releases a little dopamine to increase desire, and your body secretes ghrelin, which is the hormone that gives you a feeling of hunger. You eat the Cinnabon, more dopamine is released because it tastes awesome. Then insulin levels rise, clearing out the dopamine so it stops tasting as good. Then leptin is released and you're full. But if you are leptin and insulin resistant, and if you are obese, you are most certainly leptin and insulin resistant. That's not where the story ends. The dopamine isn't cleared out, so that Cinnabon tastes awesome for far more bites than it should, and the increased insulin tells your body that you should be hungry for far longer than you should, and at the end of the day, you're a little fatter than when you started. This cycle is no different for food than it is for drugs or alcohol. Once you need more and more dopamine to get the same high from food that you used to get, you're addicted. So according to the American Psychological Association, you are addicted to something if you have just 3 of the following 7 symptoms. Number 1, tolerance. You need more food to get the same pleasurable effect. Why do you think you have to supersize every meal? Why do you think you order the 20-piece nugget when 10 is plenty? It's because you've grown a tolerance for it. Number 2, withdrawal. This can be physical symptoms like tremors, or psychological ones like depression or anxiety if you don't get the food that you crave. I remember when I tried to stop drinking sodas, I was totally obsessed with drinking a Coke until I finally just gave in and had to have one. And if you've ever tried to stop eating something like sugar and fast food, you probably have gone through a stage where you've become obsessed with it. And you may be going through that stage right now if you're following along with the 28-day challenge, where you just get obsessed with your sugar. Number 3, binging. This includes eating until you're uncomfortable, eating when you're not hungry, eating when you're alone due to shame, feeling disgusted, depressed, ashamed, or even panicked after overeating. Have you ever sat in the dark and ate an entire pint of Ben & Jerry's? Not a pretty look. Number 4, desire or attempts to quit. The dieting industry is a $160 billion a year industry. It's not that the overweight aren't trying to lose weight. They just don't know how to do it. And they're fighting against their own physiology when it comes to trying to stop overeating. Have you ever stopped eating something for a few weeks or a few months even, and then go right back to what you were avoiding till all the weight came back? Yeah. Number 5, craving or seeking. Have you ever left the house in the middle of the night because you just had to have a dessert? Can you not start your day unless you get a real sugary drink from Starbucks? This is an addict seeking their drug. Number 6, interference with life. Has your addiction ever compromised your life? Have you ever had to buy 2 airline tickets because you couldn't fit into one seat? Have you ever lost a job because you were too overweight to perform it? Or maybe never even got hired because you were just too fat? That's your addiction interfering with your life. And finally, number 7, use despite negative consequences. So you know that what you're eating is shortening your lifespan and causing you harm, yet you just continue to eat. That's a sign of addiction. So how do you handle this addiction? Well, how do you handle like any addiction? You cut it out of your life, you go through withdrawal symptoms, and you never look back. And that's the beautiful thing about the ketogenic diet, is it cuts out the part of food that is the most addictive, namely the sugar and the carbs that break down into sugar. Once you cut those foods out of your life, you're going to have a much easier time dealing with food addiction, because the rest of your hormones are going to work properly. Your insulin levels are going to drop. Your leptin levels are going to go to the right place. Your dopamine, you're not going to be dopamine resistant anymore. You'll get more pleasure from your food. So all of your hormones are going to settle, and you're going to have an easier time dealing with your addictions. And again, that's the power of a ketogenic diet. All right, appreciate you guys watching. This has been day 7 of the 20-day challenge. Thanks for watching. We will talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.